She's just a walking burden. No husband, no kids, always sick, always needing something. They said it behind my back, but it was enough to push me out of my own family. This is my story of how I stayed silent for years until the day I decided I wouldn't disappear quietly. It wasn't a violent cough, just a dry one, a remnant from the cold I couldn't seem to shake. But it echoed off the kitchen tile like a personal offense. Karen paused mid-slice on a pile of sweet potatoes, jaw tightening. I reached for a paper towel to muffle the next one. "Maybe you should sit," she said, not looking at me. "I'm fine," I replied, my voice low, measured. "You always say that," she muttered, then quickly added, "I just don't want you overexerting." I stepped back, placing the peeler down. The air smelled of cinnamon and thyme, but under it was something more pungent. Unease. Megan breezed in with her usual plastic sunshine, balancing a tray of cranberry jars. "You okay, Rachel? You look pale," she chirped. Before I could answer, she turned to Karen. "Oh, I had the best idea. That Seacrest property? What if we Airbnb'd it for the holidays? Waterfront views, local wine, Grandma's coastal cottage. People would eat it up." Karen laughed too quickly. "You might be onto something." I froze at the sink, hands still wet. The Seacrest House wasn't just a property. It was where I spent the summer of my 16th year when my health had bottomed out, and my parents were too overwhelmed to manage me. Grandma took me in, just her and me, reading by the windows, walking the shoreline when I was strong enough. She made me feel like I wasn't a burden. It was the last time I felt like I mattered. I excused myself before dinner, claiming fatigue. No one protested. Upstairs in the old guest room, I pulled open the drawer of the nightstand and found it still there. The photo of me and Grandma sitting on the porch swing at Seacrest. Tucked behind the frame, a yellowing scrap of paper with her handwriting. "If you ever need a place, come here." I stared at it until the dinner bell rang. Downstairs, the table was set with the usual performative grandeur. The good china. Wine glasses I wasn't trusted to pour. Megan poured herself seconds before even sitting. Nathan took the seat beside Donald, both men silent as shadows. As the meal began, the conversation turned, predictably, to logistics, expenses, who was bringing what for Thanksgiving next week. That's when Karen folded her hands delicately and smiled at me. That thin-lipped expression she reserved for conflict hidden beneath grace. "I've been meaning to bring this up," she began, voice gentle. "We've all talked, and we think it's time Rachel considered assisted living, for everyone's peace of mind." Silence. Even Megan stopped chewing. I looked around. Donald kept buttering his roll like he hadn't heard. Nathan focused on a crack in the gravy boat. No one met my eyes. "Is that what you really think?" I asked, almost too quietly. "It's not about what we think," Karen said smoothly. "It's about what's best. You're tired. You're not as strong as you used to be." I blinked, pressing my fingers into my lap so hard I felt the nails dig crescent moons into my palms. "For who?" I whispered. "Best for who?" Still, no one answered. Dinner continued. I didn't taste a thing. Later that night, I packed my bag in silence. Just a few clothes, a bottle of medication, and the photo from the drawer. My fingers shook, but not from illness. From restraint. Outside my room, I heard a footstep. A shadow lingered at the door. Nathan. He stood there for a while. I could almost feel his hand lifting, then pausing, suspended between guilt and fear. But he never knocked. And then he walked away. When my mother took me to the train station, she didn't hug me. She just said, "Call me if you need anything." But her voice wasn't necessary. The doors slid closed behind me with a finality that felt heavier than my suitcase. The cold metal bench on the platform offered no comfort, but I sat anyway, staring at the passing cars with that numbness I used to think was strength. I told myself I could handle this. I always told myself that. The rented room smelled like old soap and unfamiliar laundry detergent. It was barely furnished. A single bed with a sunken mattress, a shelf too crooked to use, and a view of the parking lot behind the pharmacy. The silence was sterile, different from the thick, judgmental quiet at home. This was the absence of care, not its counterfeit. I made tea that first night, fumbled with the kettle, the wrong burner, the cheap aluminum pot, burned my hand, laughed at myself, then cried harder than I had in months. The next day, I stood in line at the pharmacy to refill my prescription, only to be told my insurance had declined the refill. I blinked. "She's been removed as your medical proxy," the woman behind the counter explained, glancing at her monitor. "No authorized contact now." I stared at her, the words washing over me like a freezing wave. I nodded, too ashamed to ask anything else. Back in my room, I laid the hospital letter on the desk. Removed, effective immediately. No phone call, no warning. I stared at the white ceiling, the water-stained corners. I imagined them sitting at home watching a show. Megan making wine jokes. Karen opening mail and tossing mine into the trash without reading. On the third day, I met Celine. She lived across the hall, mid-40s, a nurse who worked night shifts and kept her door half open. The first time I coughed in the hallway, she popped out with a bottle of elderberry syrup and a look that meant business. "You new here?" she asked. I nodded. "Just settling in." She tilted her head. "People don't settle in here. They recover or give up." That made me laugh, which made me cough, which made her sigh and hand me a mug. She didn't ask why I was alone. She just said, "If anyone ever makes you feel replaceable, remember this. You're not. You're just inconvenient to their comfort." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her words over and over. In the morning, I opened the drawer at the foot of the bed and found the letter from Grandma again, the one I'd never finished reading. The envelope was thin, the ink faded. She had written it the summer before her condition worsened. I'd read the first page back then, the sweet part, full of affection. But the second page had been folded in tight, like something private even in its giving. I opened it slowly now, fingertips trembling. "Rachel, if you're reading this alone, it means they pushed you too far again. I'm sorry. I told your mother to remember your heart, not just your health chart. I told Nathan too. But sometimes people protect their own fear before they protect family." I read that sentence 3 times before folding the letter again. My throat burned. This wasn't a surprise. It was a confirmation. 3 more days passed. I fell into routine. Toast and tea in the morning, a slow walk to the drugstore, writing short notes to myself on napkins just to feel present. I didn't hear from Nathan, except once. A single text. "Are you okay?" I replied, "I'm fine." He didn't answer. On the 6th night, I returned from the mailbox and found a small, weathered package resting against my door. No return address. Just my name, scrawled in Nathan's unmistakable handwriting. My stomach dropped. Inside, a flat brown envelope. Taped to it, a single torn piece of notepad. "You need to know this." I sat down hard on the edge of the bed and opened it with shaking fingers. The first thing I pulled out was a folded letter. Nathan's writing was rushed, uneven. "Rachel, I should have said something sooner." I kept quiet because I didn't want to disrupt the family. But I think not saying anything has done more damage than I ever could by telling the truth. 3 years ago, when you were taking care of Grandma, she made some changes. She had her lawyer update her will. She left the Seacrest House to you. Fully. No conditions. It was notarized, witnessed, and mailed to Mom and Dad. They read it. They put it in the drawer and never brought it up again. My breath hitched. I unfolded the next paper. A scanned copy of a notarized will. Official stamp. Date: October 11th, 3 years prior. Line 6. I leave the coastal residence known as Seacrest House solely to my granddaughter, Rachel Myers. Below it, Grandma's careful signature, and 2 witnesses. I sat there for a long time. My tea went cold. My fingers trembled. They had known. They'd let Megan talk about converting it into an Airbnb. They'd watched me pack my bags, sleep on a stranger's mattress, and still said nothing. At the end of the letter, Nathan's final line was scrawled in heavy pen. I'm sorry for being silent, but I can't let them erase you as if you never existed. The house they hid me from, it's mine now. And I'm going back. Not to ask for anything, but to finish. Seacrest was colder than I remembered, though maybe that was just the wind cutting through the gaps in the old siding. I had turned the heating on early that morning, made coffee in the chipped blue mug Grandma used to call hers, and stood in the kitchen until my pulse slowed enough to face what I had to do. I packed the envelope carefully. Will, letter, copy of the delivery slip. Nothing extra. No vengeance. Just the facts. As I drove toward the house I grew up in, I heard her voice again. Not Karen's or Megan's, but Grandma's. That one December evening years ago, just after she'd finalized her will, she'd said it with her hand lightly on mine. They won't remember you died unless you leave proof you ever lived. I rang the doorbell, though I didn't need to. I still remembered the code. I just wanted them to feel me coming this time. The living room was crowded with familiar faces dressed in muted colors. Black, navy, one dark green dress that looked out of place on Megan, who wore it with too much sparkle for grief. A table with photos of Grandma sat in the center, surrounded by votive candles and a white vase of lilies. Someone had printed one of my childhood pictures with her. Me asleep on her lap, her knitting resting on my shoulder like a shawl of safety. No one came to greet me. Not really. Karen gave a thin-lipped smile. Donald nodded stiffly. Megan blinked once and turned back to her conversation with someone from church. Aunt Cheryl stood near the fireplace, watching me with unreadable eyes. I stood alone for the first 15 minutes, sipping lukewarm tea and listening to Megan retell a story about how Grandma used to make the best lemon bars. A lie, if anyone cared to remember. Grandma hated lemon bars. Rachel, Karen finally said, her voice an uncomfortable balance between hostess and mother. We didn't think you'd come. I wasn't invited, I said evenly. Well, we didn't know if you were well enough to travel. I drove. Megan's glass clinked too loudly on the table. It's good you're here, she said with a voice that clearly meant the opposite. I nodded politely and walked to the photo table. I touched one of the frames, Grandma holding a seashell against her ear. That summer, she told me to write my name in wet sand and watch how long it stayed before the sea claimed it. The only way they remember you, she'd whispered, is if you carve it in stone instead. Excuse me, I said clearly. The room quieted, not out of respect, but because my voice was not part of the planned script. I'd like to say a few words. Karen opened her mouth, hesitated, then closed it. I stepped forward. My grandmother wasn't just kind. She was deliberate. She didn't give compliments she didn't mean. She didn't say, I love you, unless she truly did. And she didn't make promises she couldn't keep. I paused. The silence that met me was dense, polite. She made one promise to me that some of you didn't know about, I continued. But it's time I share it. Megan's chair scraped. Rachel, maybe this isn't the place. Donald lifted one hand. Let her talk. I opened my bag slowly. Not for effect, but to keep my fingers steady. I pulled out the envelope, removed the copy of the will, and unfolded it on the table where the photos sat. She left me that house, I said calmly. The one in Seacrest. This is the notarized copy of her will, dated 3 years ago. It was sent to this house. Received. Read. Ignored. Dead silence. Karen's lips parted in a whisper but said nothing. Megan stood frozen. A second later, her wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered against the floor. Aunt Cheryl didn't move. Her eyes were locked on the paper, flicking from the signature to the witness line. She took a breath, then nodded. Barely. I reached back into the envelope. And here's something else, I said. Nathan's letter. I unfolded the handwritten page and laid it next to the will. He wrote this after realizing Megan was trying to sell the house. After you all pretended none of this existed. Karen took a shaky step forward. You shouldn't have done that. I looked at her. Number you shouldn't have. My mother told me to save face for the family, but she didn't think. True honor comes from honesty. The chandelier above us shimmered like ice, refracting every flicker of candlelight into something theatrical. It made the room feel more staged than sacred. A circle of half-finished teacups, untouched pie, and relatives with perfect postures filled the living room like reluctant extras. I placed the final document on the table and didn't speak right away. Silence had always been the Myers family's favorite form of control, but tonight, I'd weaponized it. You've all seen the will, I said, voice steady. But there's more. Karen didn't blink. Megan had moved to the edge of the sofa, perched like a hawk in a dress that looked too expensive for grief. Donald sat in the corner, half sunken into his leather armchair, hands pressed flat on his knees. I'd like to read you a few lines, I continued, sliding a single sheet from a small manila folder. This is from Nathan, dated last month. My fingers trembled slightly as I unfolded it, but my voice didn't. Rachel, I know I've been silent for too long. I should have stood up when you were pushed out, but I thought being quiet meant staying neutral. It didn't. It meant being complicit. Mom signed for the will. She opened it in the kitchen. I saw her read it, fold it, and put it in the drawer. She never told you. When I asked why, she said, she doesn't need more illusions. That house isn't hers to have. Megan's breath hitched. I didn't look up. I found the confirmation email from the notary. I'm enclosing it too. You deserve the truth, even if it means they hate me for it. I'm sorry, Mom, but this is true. I laid the email printout beside the letter. Karen's knuckles whitened. This is the signed receipt, I said next. From the courier service, the envelope with the original will was delivered here 3 years ago. The recipient, Karen Myers, I pointed. Signed for. Date stamped. Tracked. The room was still, except for the shifting shadows from the fire. And this, I continued, sliding the last sheet across the table, is the scan from the notary's office. The legal copy. Certified, sealed, unaltered. A digital record was backed up, which means... I paused. Even if this paper were torn up today, it would still stand. A faint sound came from the corner. Cheryl cleared her throat. That's a federal document? Yes, I said. And it names me as the sole inheritor of Seacrest House. Megan slammed her hand on the table. You're making this up to claim the house. You've always been dramatic, Rachel, ever since college. You want attention, and now you've made up... I'm not claiming, I said, still seated. I'm taking back what belongs to me. Her voice cracked into a sharp laugh. That house was going to fund my business. You don't even want it. I lived there, I replied, still calm. You just want to gut it and flip it on Zillow. Megan's mouth opened, then shut. Karen finally spoke, but it was barely a whisper. You've misunderstood the intention. I looked at her. My mother, who used to braid my hair with the same hands that now clench the armrest. There's no misunderstanding, Mom. There's a paper trail, a signature, a silence that lasted 3 years, and not once, not even when you told me to go, did you say, by the way, your grandmother left you a home? Donald's hands trembled slightly on his lap. His eyes stayed fixed on the floor. I heard movement at the side door. A figure stepped forward. Tall, professional. My lawyer, whom I'd asked to wait until the documents were shared, walked into the light and nodded at me. I'm here representing Miss Myers, he said. These documents are valid. Based on the evidence provided, the Inheritance Council will reconvene, this time under full legal protocol. There will be no sale until it is resolved. Karen flinched. Megan stood. You think a lawyer changes anything? You think this makes you better than us? No, I said, rising and slipping the documents back into my bag. I think it makes me free. Cheryl murmured something, too soft to catch. Donald leaned back, defeated. I glanced toward the table. Half-eaten desserts, scattered napkins, and a photo of Grandma placed too neatly in a gold frame. A woman who'd seen this coming. I slung my bag over my shoulder. I will not be having dinner here. Their silence afterward, not because of regret, but because for the first time they knew I wasn't afraid. The next morning at Seacrest, I opened every window. The sea air came in cold, sharp with salt. I let it in anyway. I swept the entryway, scrubbed the coffee rings off the kitchen counter, and dusted every frame on the living room walls. When I reached the mantel, I paused. Grandma's photo sat where it always had, facing the bay. I wiped it clean with a soft cloth, tracing her smile with my thumb. She looked like she already knew how all this would unfold. "You were always a few steps ahead," I murmured. A delivery truck rumbled up the drive. I stepped onto the porch just as the driver left a cardboard envelope on the steps, legal-sized. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a letterhead. Hollis and Lane, LLP. The message was direct. Megan had retained counsel. Her team was willing to explore renegotiation regarding the Seacrest property, citing familial ambiguity and emotional hardship. They offered a proposal: split profits from a potential sale, with an option for Megan to occupy the home as primary caretaker pending market reevaluation. I laughed, actually laughed, then walked back inside and placed the letter neatly into my fireplace. I didn't light it, just left it there, untouched, like an offering to something I no longer feared. Instead, I opened my laptop. I sent a single email to Megan's attorney. Subject: Seacrest property content. The ownership is legally confirmed. There will be no renegotiation. Future contact should be directed to my legal representative. Regards, Rachel Myers. By noon, another letter arrived, this one handwritten. The penmanship was unmistakable. Karen. 3 pages, pale blue ink, thin loops on lined stationery. The first page was soft. I didn't mean for it to go this far. The second page grew heavier. Your father isn't sleeping well. His back pain is worse again. The third was classic Karen. Maybe one day you'll understand what it means to protect a family. I hope you can forgive us. Nowhere in the letter was the word sorry. Nowhere did she say I was right. I folded it, slid it into a new envelope, and walked down to the little post office near the main road. There, I mailed back a single line on cream stationery. I'm not angry. I just chose peace. The walk back took me past the beach. A child ran along the wet sand, holding a blue kite that tugged wildly against the wind. The child laughed, pure and unburdened. For a moment, I thought of Ellie, the niece who used to braid shells into my hair, who used to slip notes under my bedroom door when she couldn't sleep. I hadn't heard from her since the dinner. I didn't know if she even knew what had happened, and I didn't know if I'd ever hear her laugh again. The ache came quick and deep, but I didn't stop walking. Back at the house, I pulled down a weathered frame from the hallway, the one Grandma always insisted stay just as it was. Behind it, the wall held something unexpected. A small piece of masking tape curled at the edges. I peeled it back carefully and found a folded note, aged and yellowed. If you can read this, it means you are strong enough to live for yourself. Grandma. My breath caught in my throat. No signature, no lecture. Just that. Plain, unwavering truth. I leaned against the wall, holding the note to my chest. Not to cry, just to feel it. That evening, after a dinner of tomato soup and buttered toast, I curled up on the worn love seat and watched the sky turn indigo. The waves outside rolled in, then back, a rhythm I could trust. A rhythm that didn't ask anything from me. Then my phone lit up. Unknown number, but I knew it. Are you free this weekend? There's something I didn't get to tell you that day. They thought I came back for revenge. But no, I just came back to say one last time. I'm still alive. and alive enough to keep them quiet. The morning was unusually clear, the sky a pale silk stretched wide over the sea. I opened every window in Seacrest House, not for ceremony, but for light. The house seemed to breathe easier now. The shadows were softer, the silence less heavy. Even the old floorboards had stopped groaning as loudly. I had just finished placing Grandma's photo on the windowsill in the reading room, the spot with the best morning light, when a soft knock came at the door. Nathan stood there, holding nothing, just his hands folded in front of him, his eyes searching. "Hey," he said. "Hi." He didn't ask to come in. I stepped aside anyway. We sat in the kitchen. I poured coffee without asking. He didn't reach for sugar, and I didn't comment. There was a slowness between us, not from awkwardness, but from things too long unsaid. "I was the one who scanned the letter," he said finally, "and sent it to the lawyer." I nodded. "I figured." "I heard Megan on the phone," he continued, voice tight. "She was talking about finding a buyer. Said you didn't deserve the house. That you'd just sulk until someone paid you to leave." I stayed quiet. Let him speak. "I was scared," he admitted. "Scared of Mom, scared of Megan. But I knew if I didn't do something, I'd become them." "You chose the right time," I said simply. He blinked, like he expected more. Anger, maybe, but there was none left. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. When he left, he paused at the front steps and turned back once. "If she tries anything again, I'll stand up." I just nodded. Later that day, I walked into town. The sea sparkled like someone had shattered light across it. At the bakery, the owner, a woman with thick gray braids and a warm smile, wrapped up a small cake without me asking. "She used to come in every Tuesday," she said. "Always got the lemon cream one. Said it was her soft armor." I took the cake home, placed it on the kitchen counter, untouched. Some things weren't for eating, just remembering. That night, I lit a single candle and wrote one final letter. "Mom, I don't need your forgiveness. I just need you to not forget. I existed. That I loved. That I gave. That I was there when no one else stayed." I folded the letter gently and placed it into a small wooden box, alongside the hospital notice, the receipts, and her first apology that never said sorry. Things left behind. I walked down to the shore the next morning, barefoot in the cold sand. The tide reached for me and slipped back. For the first time, I cried. Not from pain. From release. I went home and made the changes that mattered. I opened my records, changed my medical proxy, removed Karen, added Nathan. I updated my emergency contact. My heir. Not because I trusted him completely. He still had to earn that. But because for the first time, someone else had finally chosen the truth over comfort. Later that week, a package arrived. Cream envelope, gold seal. Inside, confirmation that I was now the sole legal owner of Seacrest House. Attached was a note in Nathan's handwriting. "You're the only one she trusts. I'm just doing what she wants." No one called anymore. No midnight requests, no guilt-laced messages. I planted daisies in the front garden, baked bread on quiet mornings, joined a small online group for women rebuilding their lives after betrayal. I didn't share my story. Yet. But I read theirs. Left comments. Encouraged. Listened. Some days I wrote. Most days I just lived. And as the sun set behind the waves, casting long amber shadows over the porch, I knew this. I didn't win. I just wasn't erased. And that is justice enough. Even silence can feel like justice when it follows years of being silenced. Rachel didn't raise her voice. She simply stood firm while the lies collapsed around her. The house, the truth, and her dignity were reclaimed not through revenge, but by refusing to vanish quietly. Like a tide long held back, the truth returned, steady, undeniable, and strong enough to wash away even the deepest betrayals. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below.